Grizzly. At Grizzly, we believe charging your electric vehicle should be simple, reliable, and affordable. That's why we design, engineer, and build our chargers in Canada, ensuring top-tier quality and performance. Powered by United Chargers, every Grizzly model is crafted in-house, built to withstand extreme conditions, and tested for reliability. Recognized by leading publications for its performance and value, Grizzly delivers both durability and intelligence with heavy-duty aluminum enclosures, premium output cables, and smart charging features like scheduling, usage tracking, and OCPP compatibility with multiple charging apps. Grizzly, simple, reliable, affordable, built for every climate, every EV, everywhere you go. Visit grizzly.com to learn more.
Hello and welcome to the Batteries Included podcast. It is Friday, June 20th. Happy Friday, everyone. That quick comment just flashed up on screen. Morning, Mark, as well. Or good afternoon. Or maybe good evening, wherever you are watching or listening. Episode 93 of the Batteries Included podcast. Today, lots to talk about. The debut of the new Nissan Leaf, what it's like to drive the Kia EV4, and the death of the federal EV tax and closing of the Lease loophole, and of course, much, much more. I'm your host, Martin Lee, from the EV News Daily podcast. Joining us today is the transcendent Mr. Tom Malogany, senior editor at Inside EVs and host of the YouTube channel State of Charge. We have Dominic Yoni, longtime EV journalist and host of the YouTube channel Drive Electric with Dominic. And for those of us watching us, you'll have seen our very special guest today is John Voelcker, former editor-in-chief of Green Car Reports, now contributing editor at Car and Driver, contributor for many publications like Inside EVs and Wired Magazine as well. It is an honor to have John on the podcast this week because John's been driving something very, very interesting. Now, John, you recently went to South Korea and got to spend some time with the Kia EV4, including driving it. Now, you wrote up a really nice piece for Wired Magazine that if anyone hasn't seen it yet, go and check it out after you finish listening or watching, or just pause it and then go and read it and come back. This is a lower cost EV, so there's a lot of interest in the Kia EV4. But before we get into the EV part, let's touch on styling. There's going to be two versions, hatchback and liftback, or I've seen it called the sort of more of a saloon style, but either way, technically the liftback is the version coming to the United States. And for many, the design falls down a little bit. And sometimes, seeing a car in 2D is different to seeing it in 3D. Well, you've spent plenty of time with the car. John, welcome to the podcast. Let's get this out of the way then. So styling-wise, what did you think?
I actually like it, but that was not a universally held opinion among the reporters. I've always been slightly fond of beveled noses. If you look at the nose a little bit, it's rather like whichever BMW series it was that had a similar bevel, except a lot more, and it doesn't have a grille. The rest of it is very in line with Kia's latest design language and styling. Basically, all the lights are vertical and along the edges as opposed to horizontal. The interior is basic Kia. The two horizontal screens sitting on top of a wide dash tray and so forth. It didn't seem to attract a lot of attention in South Korea when we drove it on the road. It's actually now on sale there, but I don't mind it. But I recognize that eye of the beholder and all of that. So there will be others who disagree, possibly some on this podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know. So this is kind of the thing with this car. Like it is, I think some people might find it challenging. I thought it's kind of interesting, but like Martin was saying at the top, sometimes when, cars look different, when you can see them in person, because your perspective is different, right? And there's elements, for me, it's like the rear three quarters of this, like where the D pillar, I guess, the C pillar. It's I can't tell if I'm going to like it or not. I kind of think I don't think because I got it, but then I've seen other cars before, pictures, and hated it, and in person, it kind of like not that bad. And then after like a week, I'm loving it. So I don't
I
know.
will say that you do need to see it in the flesh to make a fair judgment. Most automotive pictures get taken from somewhere between kneecap and hip bone height, and
Right.
we actually look at cars from higher down. It's also worth noting, honestly, that this thing has a staggering low coefficient of drag. I should have looked it up before I had my article up on the screen, but it actually has a lower drag coefficient than the current Toyota Prius, and considerably lower than the EV6. So they, in order to expand range to the maximum possible, and their basic take was range, maximum range and acceptable charging time, which we'll get to in a minute. They really, really, really worked on the aerodynamics, including those rear-facing sort of mock scoops or channels along the top edges of the roof that end just before the rear window. Something I'd never seen before on any car. Not particularly unusual, just you look at them, it's still unclear to me if they're functional. But overall, I liked it. I could certainly see driving it. But opinions will differ.
Why do you think everyone piled in? And I'll stand by that phrase. It was a pile on. Maybe, I don't know, a couple of people wrote the articles, and maybe the sub editors chipped in with the headlines. There we go. And decided.
Did we lose Martin?
Did we lose Martin? Okay.
I think he's gone. So the question was, why do you think everybody piled on? Well, you were there, John, with talking to everybody. I've been to plenty of these drives. You sit around at dinner at night. Sometimes you share your thoughts on the vehicle. What was kind of like the overall discussion design-wise? Was it just like, God, this thing's horrible? Or
there was a lot of that. There were a handful of us who didn't mind it / thought it was innovative. There's the hatch.
Nice.
We're getting a sedan. They're not quite as different, I think, as they look, unless you look at them from the rear three quarters. But, very aerodynamic designs are always controversial through automotive history. Sometimes they prove to do fine. Consider the Prius, which was a sales success for Toyota for 15 years until they put hybrids into everything else, including stuff that didn't look like a Prius. The Chrysler Airflow, on the other hand, 90 years ago, was a sales catastrophe. So we'll see. But Hyundai and Kia, competitor sister companies, if you like, are both really pushing the styling envelope. Kia, at least, has what I view as a more consistent design language across their different vehicles. Hyundai's really are sort of, well, this one looks like this and that one looks like that. But I think that the combination of sharp angles, the extremely high tail and sort of barely sloped rear window, and just all the little things you do to get a drag coefficient of, I want to say 0.23, although it's dangerous to compare across makers. But I think a lot of that stuff will become less challenging as we see more of these on the road, and presumably other Kias start to look like it as well.
It somehow both looks chunky and angular, and the Kia EV9 is obviously just this big blocky thing, and yet at the same time they've made it really slippery. So that's an achievement. Two battery sizes, 58.3 and 81.4 EPA on both of those we have. So the smaller battery 235 and the larger battery 330. Are both those battery sizes coming to the US? Because in the past Hyundai and Kia have sometimes offered just the large battery on things like the Kona. What did they mention that?
Yes. And they said both battery sizes will come. I suspect that sales of the smaller battery will be minimal, but it gives them the lowest cost, lowest range, sort of entry level car that they can promote with a price which, depending on tariffs and a whole bunch of all of the other political stuff that's buffeting the auto industry right now, but depending on price, if they can have in US dollars a starting price that begins with a 2, 5-figure price that begins with a 2 for this lowest range model, that will get a lot of attention, because we think that the upcoming Chevy Bolt EV will be in the low 30s, and, you know, yes, slate for $25,000 theoretically at the end of next year if it happens, but Kia has the ability to bring in a low model at a low price and get a lot of attention.
And how much of what you saw could you tell costs were being cut? Because 400 volt system, not 800 volt on original version of EGMP. Does anyone care if this is not a road tripping car or it's a infrequently road tripped car? No, not really. Still charges fine. Front wheel drive, assumption again, that is for cost. Does anybody really care about driving dynamics up to, after a certain point with a car like this? I'd argue probably not. But the, proof's always in the pudding when you sit inside it and, get touchy feely. What was your impression on how premium or how cost savvy this felt?
Certainly on the interior, it didn't feel cheap. And that has always been, to my way of thinking, one of the things that Hyundai and Kia have gotten so much better at over the last decade or so. Now, like every such drive, we drove top spec cars. I was pleased to get the one that did not have the entirely black interior. I know there are people who like those. This actually had an interior in a couple different shades of gray. Very nice. But it did not feel to me like a car that would be somewhere in the low mid 30s in the upper trim level. But I don't think people who buy EVs care about road dynamics. We couldn't really test those because we had 3 kinds of driving that we got to do. I mean, we drove most of the day. Korean highways are incredibly smooth, well-maintained, well-paved. They have frequently varying speed limits, camera enforced. So they said very firmly, pay attention. Then the roads in and around Seoul are also very smooth. Lots of stop and go traffic, also variable speed limits. We had exactly 1 bit of twisties, which was capped at 18 miles an hour, 30. So I'm looking forward to getting the thing in North America when I actually drive it like North Americans may. But overall, it clearly defaults to the Korean mode of relatively soft, compliant suspension. Not slushy, but sort of the other end of the scale from a Tesla. I recently drove an updated Model Y, and I had sort of forgotten that is a firm ride that on certain U.S. pavement surfaces is downright harsh.
So on screen for our audio listeners, you can check this show out on YouTube if you want to. So we're looking at a really quite substantial charge flap, a charge port cover. And then, of course, inside, just the tiny North American charging standard. So that's J3400 standard on this. Why such? I guess that has to take into account CCS2 as well, which we'll get over here. So that's a large area.
CCS2, I don't know about Japan, but CHAdeMO plus AC charging.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Whatever they use in China. And I can't actually visualize what the Chinese socket is like, but basically you have to have a door because you only want a single stamping that accommodates the largest possible charging out there, just like gasoline or diesel cars would have a rectangular door because you had the fuel, but then you also had the AdBlue or urea solution.
Yeah, so they've gone for a nice compact J3400 in North America. Plenty of room around it, which is good. Obviously, this week we've seen all the news about the rollback of California's clean air standards. and fully behind that rollback with the Automotive Alliance, which includes the automakers, because it obviously gives them an easier ride, and the kind of vehicles that are more polluting tend to be larger SUVs and trucks, which have higher margins on. So that's probably where the US auto market gets a reputation for selling huge cars. But John, where does this Kia EV4 fit in for you? You've already mentioned the Bolt. A beginning price of a 2 would, I think, be incredible. Is there an appetite for this vehicle? What do you think?
One of the challenges in the US market is affordability, and it has been for a while. A lot of that is due not necessarily to automakers just randomly jacking prices, but we've added an enormous amount of expected and mandated content to cars over the last 15 years. Safety standards preeminent among them. The example I like to use is if you think back to what we would call a compact car. When I drive cars in that segment now, there is 6 inches of room between my outboard shoulder and the B-pillar. That did not used to be the case, but it's required in order to make side crash standards work properly, enough room for the airbag to inflate and so forth. So all the footprints have gotten bigger. There's a lot more electronic equipment, sort of emergency, automatic emergency braking is standard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, there are reasons everything's gotten more expensive, but a smaller and smaller portion of US households can afford a new car. And so, yes, used cars are better. They're lasting longer. They're more reliable than they were 10 or 20 years ago. But volume can come by having less expensive vehicles that still meet all the standards. And really the open question is, how low can you go? Slate is kind of the extreme on that. My personal suspicion is that the $25,000 Slate goes out the door at 35 because people are going to want the bigger battery and the SUV package, but we'll see. But there really are not that many electric cars or offerings below about $40,000. And if that segment fills up, or at least gets 2 or 3 times as many entrants as it has right now, in the next 12 to 36 months, that could change the picture, just because people who want a cheap car right now have fewer and fewer car options.
Yeah.
So I guess, for this type of car, I think it's all about the monthly price, and that's where someone like Slate, and we wish them well, doesn't have, unless Jeff Bezos wants to put his hand in his pocket a bit more, the resources to subsidize that truck. Whereas Kia, Hyundai, we've seen them doing the same as the Subaru and then the Toyota BZ4X. Incredible monthly deals, lacking the federal tax credit. They chipped in $7,500 anyway. So the South Koreans have got the muscle and the size of the business to subsidize that monthly price. Over here, 9 in 10 vehicles are financed at the point of purchase, new cars. Over here, PCP, we call it PCP, personal contract purchase. So small deposit, very small monthly payments, but then what we call a balloon payment at the end after 3 years, or hand the car back. So either write them a check for 12 grand or give it back and then get a new car. So most people get into that loop and get hooked in. What's for the US market, John? Where do you think this car needs to come in terms of monthly financing to make kind of a hardworking person that needs reliable, safe transport attractive? Because the headline price is interesting, but what are people going to pay?
A lot of it has to do with how Kia, and anyone else for that matter, sets up what they think will be the residual value of the car at the end of what we call a lease, usually 3 years. So there seems to be some data that there are now fairly established prices for used EVs. We're not seeing quite as many articles of the sort we used to see of, EVs depreciate 50% in the first year because they weren't doing the math properly and accounting for the incentive. But if this could be a $300 a month lease, that's an affordable amount. I think, and fact check me on this, someone, I think I saw a statistic that said that the average vehicle lease in the US is pushing $700 a month.
I think I saw that. Yeah, I think I saw that too. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot of money, and it ties to the average sales weighted transaction price being $48,000 and sitting there for about 3 or 4 years now. So if you can do a $300 a month lease, the other thing is it depends on what the buyback is. But I also think a number of these will go to fleet usage because it has a huge rear seat. Hyundais and Kias are getting a better reputation, at least where I live, as Ubers and Lyfts, and they have electrics, which obviously are enormously cheaper to run per mile.
According to an article on NerdWallet, the average lease payment is $595, and the average monthly loan payment is $745. My God.
Okay.
Yeah. And John, you mentioned the $300 a month price point. That's pretty much where GM has the Equinox at.
Yeah.
And I think, why it's doing so well. I leased an Equinox, and that's what I'm paying, $300 a month. A couple of my friends liked it so much. I've talked about this in the podcast, but you probably don't know. 3 of my local friends here that live in Chester that would have never gotten an electric vehicle, had no interest in electric vehicles. They saw my car, and I was talking about the price. They went to the same dealer. I actually took them, and they leased the Equinox for like no money down or $300 down, $306 a month. One person's paying $317 a month. The other, right around 300. That is like the magic number to get somebody into a car that needs a car and isn't being very picky. It's a new car at $300 a month. Give it to me. And so if the number for this vehicle can be right around there, which I think it probably could be, like you said, depending on what the games they play with the residual value, I think it'll move. I think people will look past controversial aesthetics, and say, it doesn't look that bad. It looks good on my wallet, so I can deal with that.
Still want to buy sedans. I mean, not as many as used to, but not everyone wants to drive a truck imitator. The Equinox EV is interesting, though, and I bring this up only because I had a chat with an old friend yesterday who brought his almost driver's license age son into New York, and the son's favorite EV, to my complete and utter shock, is the Equinox EV. I would not remotely have expected that. I was impressed by that car when I drove it. I've written a couple of relatively favorable reviews of it, but it will be interesting because presuming the Bolt EV refreshed does in fact arrive, and GM has said 0 on that of late.
I know.
Really 0.
It's
but
curiously quiet.
Yes. Presuming that does happen, I think LFP batteries, which they're planning to use, are the political flashpoint on that one. But if they can bring in the Bolt below the Equinox EV, they can probably make a little bit better money on the Equinox EV, which then pushes up into the upper 30s to start. Bolt comes in at, let's say, 32 or something like that. All of a sudden, that puts Chevrolet right back into the game against the Hyundais and Kias of the world. Volkswagen has one car. It's old. I've always said Hyundai and Kia are really the ones to watch. That was a piece I wrote 4 years ago, and they're just proving it out.
Agree.
Yep.
I agree.
That EGMP platform really just set just set the bar for like charging, and it's the chassis itself is pretty stable. I mean, pretty competent. Its dynamics are decent. So yeah, it's a great platform.
And they just change and improve so frequently. How old is the ID4 now? Well, Hyundai is also on its 3rd or 4th, Hyundai and Kia, its 3rd or 4th generation of EVs now. Think back to the Soul EV. It had its issues, including CHAdeMO, but think how archaic that looks now in our market compared to what they're about to launch.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. All right, it's a good place to. Anyone else want to chip in on Kia EV4 before we get on to our second biggie?
Hey, just real quick on the EV4, is front-wheel drive, did they say why they went with front-wheel drive and not rear-wheel drive? I assume it's cost-related, but I don't know how that really works out.
I will say they were irritatingly unspecific about cost reductions.
Okay.
And I really had to fight to get even the tiny smattering. The one thing that actually the EV3 and 4 together have is a much smaller, more compact heat pump, for instance, an ancillary that no one thinks about. But if you can make it smaller, simpler, and still effective, that cuts cost. The 400 volt thing, I've been surprised at the amount of pushback from readers and commenters, 400 volts, why would you ever do that? The answer is because 800 volt components, not just the batteries, but the motors and all the other stuff, the power electronics,
the inverters
are used in much lower volume. Porsche, Hyundai, Kia, and there's a couple of others I forget. 400 volt components have been standard pretty much since the first Toyota Prius. There's a huge production base. They're produced in much higher volumes. And as a result, the price of any given component is way less than half. And that stuff counts. That's how you take cost out of a car.
Yeah, this had to come in at a low price point, and if let's say they had elected to make this an 800 volt system, $3,000 more?
Yeah,
probably in that ballpark. I mean, we don't know the exact price of components, but we're not talking about $500 more. It would be in the thousands, a couple $1,000s, and that's a huge delta when you're trying to push down the price and make this as affordable as possible. It was a no-brainer for Porsche to use it on their vehicles. But even Porsche, and I've talked to them about this, they told me they can envision making vehicles at some point with 400 volt architecture if it suits that vehicle. Well, which I was a little surprised to hear them say, but they said no, the voltage architecture has to match the vehicle's purpose. And right now, the vehicles we're making, this is the right use, but we absolutely would use a 400 volt architecture in the future if it was right for that vehicle. So we're not going to see the whole industry just transition to 800 volt, anytime soon. We're going to have the 400 volt battery systems here for a long time, and they're fine. There's no need for everybody to throw their arms up every time a new EV gets announced and it doesn't have an 800 volt architecture. Like, oh, that's so 2010. No, it's not the case. But I hear you, John. We get a lot of that.
With love and respect to our collective fan bases, EV advocates and followers often throw their arms up at things. So, like I said,
front-wheel drive, like that's just to your point. I'm like, why is it front-wheel drive? Our friend Andrew Lambrecht had a little thing on LinkedIn. He likes that platform, but yeah, just expressing his thoughts on front-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive. And I'm not sure if it was linked to the Kia EV4 or something else, but maybe it was the Kia EV4. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of people, I don't know, just feel like front-wheel drive is for like when front-wheel drive first came in, it was not popular. It really took a while, I think, for it to catch on for a lot of people. I think, and eventually it did. It's become really the default thing because you have the engine right over the front wheels, and it just on slippery surfaces you get more grip that way. So it seems to work pretty well. But that advantage kind of goes away with EVs, right? You don't have a big heavy engine sitting over the front axle anymore. And when you take off, the weight is transferred to the rear axle, and that's where all the traction is now on a car. So it just so I like seeing rear-wheel drive EVs, but I guess I should get over it, really, right?
Wow.
As Porsche said, for the purpose of the vehicle.
Yeah.
The purpose of this vehicle is to provide acceptable range, which in the US is 300 miles or more, at an affordable cost with acceptable charging time, period.
I agree 100%. People aren't going to lease this and autocross it on the weekends. This is
Right.
basic
Well, there will be
transportation.
one, but
Yeah, basic transportation, and for that, that's fine. I mean, my Equinox is front wheel drive. You know, I'm a enthusiast. You know, and I'm fine with it. You know, it's the for what the vehicle was made for. It's perfect as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Well, you'll have seen the headline of the podcast and the intro that there's another car revealed this week. Not one that we've driven, but one which was very, very highly anticipated. Nissan made the very first highway-capable EV with the lithium-ion battery in 1998, the Ultra, ALTRA. Small production run, you could only lease it, and it followed up, though, with a car called Leaf, Leaf. And a dozen years later, that was the third lithium-powered EV people could actually buy. There were things like Mitsubishi i-MiEVs, Tesla Roadsters. We had some over here in Europe as well, which were kind of technically not cars, more quadricycles. But the Leaf got left behind as time moved on. It had some improvements, but even by the end, under the skin, some of the bits were getting a little long in the tooth. Now, when the Leaf did suffer with its air-cooled battery design in very hot climates, it got some bad press, and probably rightly so for those people that did suffer. But Nissan launched the Ariya in 2022 with a more modern powertrain, and on the same platform, we now have the third generation Nissan Leaf. So, new form factor. This is not the Nissan Leaf. This is now what they call a compact crossover. It will be offered with a 52 kilowatt-hour battery paired with a 174 horsepower motor. But first, the US gets a 75 kilowatt-hour battery. Yes, of course, it's liquid cooled. Before anyone in the comments wonders, yes, of course, that's all sorted. 214 horsepower motor. Not only does the next Leaf have all the proper thermal management, it has battery preconditioning. The lower trims have manual preconditioning, but that's something, and honestly, it's fine. Nissan's also being more sophisticated about how it heats up the battery, scavenging heat from the drive motor and the onboard charger to warm the battery when it needs that. This is the real deal. It'll charge at 150 kilowatts through in the US or North America. That'll be J3400 as well, located on the front passenger side. 10 to 80 in 35 minutes. And it'll charge 7.2 kilowatts via the charge port on the other side. Yes, it has two charge ports. Now, we can get into some more features and trims, and I can fill in some more blanks on specs and stuff like that. But, Tom, first of all, well, we have seen this before, two charge ports, but that's what they're going to do. And I saw it reported, Tom, look, before we get into that, new Nissan Leaf, Tom, what do you think?
I love how it looks. I wish that they came out with this and not the Ariya back as their next EV. I had said that back at the time. I wish we would have just gotten a second generation vehicle that's more affordable, Leaf 2.0, rather than the Ariya. But here we are. I think it looks great, personally. I haven't had the chance to drive it or see it in person. I wasn't able to attend the media events. But I think it looks great, to be honest with you.
It's good.
Yeah, I mean, looks wise, yeah. Charging is a little bizarre.
So two ports. I saw it reported this week, fast charging one side, slow charging the other. That's not technically true. It's AC charging one side, DC charging the other. But the way that North America is rolling out J3400, unless you're Tesla, does complicate things when we start talking AC DC. Can you fill us in, and what do you think of this idea of two sockets?
Yeah, well, that's what your point there. It does complicate things, and we need the automakers to do whatever they can to make charging simpler. We have adapters. We have all different types of CHAdeMO and J1772 and NACS. to the average person that's new to electric vehicles, this must appear extremely daunting. I mean, I get comments on my YouTube videos when I'm explaining adapters and so forth that people like, see, this is why I won't get an EV. This stuff's just, it's too confusing. And to me, the dual charge ports only add to that confusion. I wish they hadn't done this. We've seen it before. Porsche does it, Audi does it, you know, and they have the DC on one side and AC on the other side. I just think, you know, with say Porsche, it's like it's a feature, you know, but with the Leaf, it's an aggravation, you know. It's a totally different, like I think Porsche can get away with it, but this to me, I don't like it at all. And I don't like the fact that, again, Nissan opts for very low charge rates on their AC side, 7.2 kilowatt. God, that is so 2012. You know, I had a deposit on the original Nissan Leaf, I remember, and you know, way before it was available, before the specs even came out. At the time, I was driving, I guess it was the Mini E. It might have been the Active E. I think it was the Mini E, and the Mini E. And the Mini E could charge at 11.5 kilowatt back in on AC back in 2010. You know, 2009. And I remember when the details came out on the Leaf that it was going to charge at 3.3 kilowatt on AC. I was like, I can't even live with that. You know, it wouldn't be fully charged by the time I get home at night. I used to get home at midnight when I owned my restaurant. I was back on the road at 6 or 7 in the morning. I'm like, I can't make it to work the next day. This is terrible. So I canceled that's the reason why I didn't get the initial Leaf, because they launched it with 3.3 kilowatt. Now here we are in 2025. They're still on 7.2 kilowatt. For crying out loud, can we get a 48 amp onboard charger? All right, so that's AC. You know, and why wouldn't they just make the NACS port just be the port? Why confuse people? I don't get it. It seems like they did so much right, and this is just going to be confusing to people. It really is. Someone's going to roll up to a destination charger, Tesla destination charger, you know, that has the NACS plug and say, oh yeah, that's the plug I use, you know, and it won't work. They won't understand why. It's going to happen. You know, I mean, it's really going to be difficult. I think what a horrible decision. They did, I think, so many things right with this, and it's just the charging. They just completely missed it in every facet, having slow AC charging, having to use a different connector. I'm really disappointed in that.
Oh, come on, Tom. Tell us what you really think.
Yeah, John, you know how if there's one thing that'll get me going, it's charging done wrong. But you know, I think it's just going to confuse people. I think it's unfortunate. Will people learn it? Sure. You know, once you get the car, you'll learn it. But I can imagine people rolling up to hotels where Tesla has the destination charge or whatever and being like, oh yeah, this will plug in, and not understanding why it won't plug in. And now there's you go inside, they're talking to the person at the front desk at the hotel. They'll have no idea. They'll be like, well, everybody uses that. It's working. Well, it won't charge my car. I'm only staying here because it said you had charging, and now I need to be charged by the morning. This is terrible. You know, I suppose, I don't know. They can use an adapter, a NACS to J1772 adapter, and plug in on that side. But to engineer a car today in 2025, you know, knowing that you're engineering it, knowing that people are absolutely going to need to use an adapter frequently, when you could have eliminated that issue, this could have been eliminated very easily. That bothers me.
So, couple of things here, if I may jump in. Number one, my favorite statistic that no one ever talks about is that of the households that can afford to buy any new vehicle at all in the US, 80% have dedicated off-street parking, which means they can have home charging. Yes, 1 in 5 don't, but there is going to be a lot more home charging for new cars. And frankly, I'm not worried about used Leaf 7 years from now. So I think if their salespeople are smart, that's a conditional sentence. Highway charging over here, home charging over here.
Hmm.
You don't talk about fast or slow. God knows you don't talk about AC and DC, please. But if you say charge it at home over here, charge it on the highway over here.
Home highway, that's great.
Because in the end, the bulk of these are going to be charged at home. And I'm not necessarily seeing people doing incredibly long road trips in their new Nissan Leafs, crossover or not. And I saw zero mention of all-wheel drive. I live in a part of the country north of Tom where it's not a utility vehicle unless you have available all-wheel drive. And Tom's seen my driveway, so he knows why. You know, it's basically a tall hatchback. I'm waiting to see how the charging reaction comes. And frankly, 7.2 kilowatts is enough for overnight. Maybe not for the restaurateur that gets home at midnight and leaves at 6 in the morning. But for the vast majority of buyers, it will be fine. Not to mention at work charging. I think the 7.2 is pure cost reduction. Now, I need to go back and look at the Kia specs, but does anyone remember in my review if I think it was 11 kilowatts on the EV4?
Just about every new EV now is 11 kilowatts on this 48 amp onboard charger, and it's a minimal.
You think the Bolt EV will be?
What's that?
Do you think the Bolt EV will be 11 kilowatt onboard chargers?
Yeah,
are more expensive.
Not much. So somebody in the industry told me it's about, well, not much. I know every penny gets counted. It's between $150 and $200 more.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
if you apply the 2-time multiple on sales price, you've automatically added $300 to $400 to the cost of your car. That's a prodigious amount where they shave costs on, you know, little black plastic pieces.
But don't forget, a lot of these lower cost EVs, John, the people don't live in private homes. As now we're getting more and more into people living in multifamily dwellings, they're going to rely on, well, many of them will rely on DC charging, but a lot of them will have a level 2 charging eventually as we get it deployed in public parking lots and so forth, or they'll charge at work. But the public parking lots and so forth, it really, if the charging can accommodate it, and we're seeing now a lot of charging come online that's 48 amps that's designed for multifamily dwellings, that can make a difference, because a lot of times they're not charging overnight. They're charging during the day for a certain amount of period, a certain period of time, where that extra, 4 kilowatt every hour does make a difference.
I will agree conditionally, but I'd like to see the data. Yeah. Because if a lower income multiple dwelling family is using this as their primary vehicle, it may well be more than the 30 or 40 miles a day. Mm-hmm. And if so, they may end up having to charge overnight anyway. I don't know what the data is. That's where I try to start writing from. So I think much to be determined as we move into that much more complicated set of owners who do live in multiple dwellings.
And the problem with getting data on that is it is constantly changing and improve. Like, the people that live in multifamily dwellings, the rate of adoption has been increasing. As very few people bought EVs that lived in those type of facilities 3-4 years ago. But now, particularly with lower cost, the vehicles, like for instance,
I don't think mentioned earlier, I think it's the rise of used EVs.
Yeah,
we didn't have volumes of used EVs until Bolts and Model 3s from 2017 and there afterwards came on. And I think that's really what's driving it.
It has. But for instance, I mentioned earlier, 3 of my friends got Equinoxes. 2 of them live in apartments. So what
are they doing?
Well, one charges. One, I'm actually getting Emporia actually is going to be installing the Emporia Pro with their dynamic load balancing system in the apartment building for him. I'm going to do a video on it actually, because he has only a 100 amp main, so he couldn't install charger. but I'm going to do a video on that because with the Emporia Pro, you can install a 48 amp charger with a 100 amp service panel. So I'm going to talk about that, how that's kind of democratizing high speed charging for people that live in apartment buildings. And the other person lives like 3 miles from a Tesla supercharger. And once a week, she just drives to the Tesla supercharger and sits there until the vehicle's about 85, 90%, and then drives away. And I was concerned that she was going to have like this was not going to be her experience. I warned her about it before she got it, but now we're like 8 months in. I just saw her a couple of days ago. She's like, "Oh, it's fine. I bring my e-reader. I just drive there. I flip it open, and all of a sudden it goes faster than I expected, and I'm unplugging and I'm leaving. And once a week she does that. So
version of the gas station model,
yeah,
basically, which is what the Europeans feel a certain proportion of multiple unit dwellers will be adopting once we have more affordable fast charging. I think.
Yeah.
God,
I just
told me that in 2019.
Yeah, just getting back to the dual charge ports.
Yeah.
I just thought, I think it's a good thing for the industry here in North America to coalesce around the single connector. I think long term, it's good for us just to have one plug. There's one charge port, there's one plug. This is how you charge your car. Boom, very simple, AC, DC. And now with the new generation of vehicles coming out that could potentially be in use or being sold the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I don't know how long the cycle is. Now we're going deep into next decade where, there's going to be brand new cars being sold without just a single connector. I think that move to the single connector is going to help adoption overall because it just makes it very easy. You don't have to think about it. Adapters are going to go away, and it seems
adapters will be with us 20 years from now.
Yeah, of course they will for the used cars more than anything. But eventually we have to get rid of them, John. And if new cars keep coming out that require adapters, then we'll never get rid of them. It just I have so many people. I get so many comments of people telling me this is why I won't get an EV. And I mentioned this before, because it's too complicated. It's like, I don't want to have to think about, I can charge here, but I can't charge here. Okay, if I buy this adapter, I could use it here. If I get this adapter, I could use it here. It just, people are busy. They don't want to deal with that. I know it's kind of simple once we explain it, but you're convincing somebody to buy their first electric vehicle. It's all new to them. There's going to be a learning curve that they think they have to learn. When we have to continually say, okay, well, there's like 4 different type of chargers out there, and you need to use this adapter if you're at this type of charger. You need to use this adapter if you're at this charger. And don't make the mistake of going to a charging station where your car can't plug into because you might not make the next charger. That is
all of which should have been in the dash 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean
I put that on the makers.
Yeah, so I mean, it'll be great once this just goes away. And I just, it bothers me that a brand new car coming out could have very easily just had the NACS service, AC and DC, like all the other new NACS vehicles that are being introduced do. It's a miss.
Except you still need 2 adapters, even if you have a single NACS plug.
Right now you will. Right now.
For the next 10 years.
Yeah, well, you'll need to have them in the car just in case, but over the course of after 5 or 6 years from now, I think for the most part you won't need to use one. I think the vast majority of the sites you go to will have the native NACS plugs there. So that's going to go away, but it'll never go away if we keep selling cars that need both.
I admire your optimism on the U.S. charging network 5 years from now.
We just simplified things over here, and if it's got the 2 pins underneath it, it's going to charge it a bit quicker. And if it hasn't, if it's just Type 2, then plug it in, it'll be slower. Onboard chargers over here, single phase 240 volt. So a 32 amp circuit is going to max you out at 7.5 kilowatts, depending on your voltage at home. It can be plus minus according to the rules by like 10% or so, and that's absolutely standard over here. So you've either got that on a single phase in Europe, or many places in mainland Europe and France, for instance, there'll be 3-phase, that's 22, which is why a lot of cars might have 22 kilowatt onboard charging. But so for us, interesting conversation to hear, you guys, because if we're charging at home, we're charging at 7 on a 32 amp circuit. But yeah, on the Leaf, has a number of cool features, mostly on the SV Plus and Platinum Plus trims. Heat pump, dual screens. The coverage of this, I'd say, unlike the Kia EV4, which is a great vehicle and pretty much, I called it a pylon, and I think that's true, which was just one thing about the looks. I think the coverage for this was universally very, very good, by the way. The Platinum Plus gets 64-color ambient lighting, a 10-speaker Bose system with speakers in the headrests, and the option for a dimming panoramic glass roof. Platinum Plus gets some cool Nissan tail lights. The Pro Pilot Assist is on all grades, with intelligent cruise control, steering assistance as well. This gets plug and charge too. Cars that you don't get, Renault Scenic, you don't get the Renault Megane E-Tech. That's all built on the CMF EV platform. So Renault, Nissan, Mitsubishi. The outgoing CEO of Renault, who's going to go and sell some luxury goods now, Luca De Meo, and leave the automotive industry after doing amazing things and sorted out Seat and did incredible things at Renault, really turned Renault around. Nissan needs to turn their business around, leaning heavily on what is a weaker partnership now, but still a partnership. So using Renault's platform for this, which I can confirm those Renault vehicles we get very, very solid and sell well. But I did see one headline from one outlet which just went with, "Can this vehicle save Nissan?" And I thought, that's quite a reach.
No.
One vehicle can save a company. This car's not going to be the one that saves Nissan. We saw the new CEO there, Ivan Espinola, is that his name? On screen there. A big job to do. So yes, apologies for getting his name wrong. John, in terms of where this fits into Nissan, they do have issues. They are hemorrhaging money. I feel lots of love for the Nissan Leaf, and I love to see this car back. How much heavy lifting has this vehicle got to do in terms of it being Nissan?
Well, in the market that the three of us cover, it remains unclear. Nissan dealers hated the last Leaf because every Leaf that they sold made them less money than selling yet another high-volume road compact crossover. I will avoid the discussion about Nissan's buyers and their financial profiles versus everybody else's. But I think it remains to be seen in the States whether this is a pure compliance vehicle. Nissan discovered it was hard to sell EVs. They had enormous plans in sort of 2009, 2010, 2011, talking to them, and then they ran smack into the market. What Tom has talked about, EVs are complicated. Maybe next time I'm interested. My neighbor has one, but still, nah, not this time, etc. This is much more mainstream than the last Leaf was, especially the first generation of the Leaf. But no, it's not going to save Nissan. In fact, if anything, depending on what happens to Nissan, it'll be collateral damage.
That's what I was thinking. I was wondering if this is actually going to come out.
I mean, it's going to come out. I understand they're going to sell it in the U.S. in like certain markets first, like California, like
that's their plan. But
right,
they need a lot of restructuring,
Yeah, it's too bad. Like John was saying, back when they had all those plans, I feel like the cost of implementing those plans and the size of the market, just discouraged them. But maybe that was the move to get they needed to get ahead of the market, really, to kind of just do what Tesla was, reach beyond what's there now and offer something that other car companies haven't been able to do yet, like a plus 200 mile car with decent performance and like a Tesla Model 3. They were right there in that same time frame, right? They had the first lithium powered car on the market, like with the Ultra. EV that Martin mentioned at the
But
beginning.
that's not what Nissan's brand value was, absent the
Right.
Z or Z.
True.
And people didn't go to Nissan dealers looking for that.
Right.
And they had a CEO at the time, widely lauded in Japan, whose sole management structure was cost cutting. The only thing that he did for a lengthy period, because the company had almost gone bankrupt for making wonderful cars in the 90s that lost them money. And so, which is a problem for an auto company. We'll see if Nissan survives. On the other hand, selling cars only in certain states, the CARB states, 14 or 16, however many there are, we'll see if that matters. If, in fact, the current administration is able to obliterate all compliance and perhaps take tailpipe emission standards back to 2022, or hey, 2020 or 2000. We don't know.
1820.
There will be lawsuits. They may well survive the current administration. And the car makers are going to continue with the product plans they put in place over the last 3 years. But if, in fact, all those standards go away, Nissan has much bigger problems than electric vehicles right now.
True. Yeah, they really need like a merger or a savior, someone. Maybe there's a billion out there who's got, his money's burning a hole in their pocket and they want to, do it like an Elon Musk kind of situation. The opportunity is right there. They have the bones of a pretty good brand.
Honda didn't want it.
No, Honda didn't. But just like an individual, like, I don't know, someone's just, wake up one day, maybe I should run a car company. I want this kind of car.
I don't see the Japanese government allowing a Chinese firm, which would have the capital, to come in and buy Nissan.
Yeah, that could be tricky. I mean, and that's probably the most likely kind of buyer too, right? I mean, that's yeah, I could see like I don't know if a Geely has the kind of cash laying around right now to do that kind of a move, but maybe a Xiaomi might. I don't know.
And it gives you a dealer network.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a whole distribution network, global distribution network. That's a lot. I mean, that's worth something. Yeah.
Okay, well that's our Nissan. It will be made in the UK in the northeast, called Sunderland, which opened up in '86. The Nissan Leaf was made in 3 places, in Japan, the UK, and the US as well, and the new Leaf will be made there. It's a big. Nissans are really, really popular here, not just because they're made in the UK, and there is a bit of that. I guess if you know a little bit about the car industry, if you're reading a car magazine, it'll always mention, Nissans are made in the UK. But that's it's not like it's widely known popular culture, but I think most people would think, I don't know, Fords are all made in the UK because it's a famous name that we grew up with. But it is very, very important to us in terms of an employer here and our economy in the north of England anyway. So which is kind of a more of a manufacturing part of the country. So very important for us that the Leaf works. The batteries are made in the same place as well. Well, over a little bridge. There's a road between the 2 buildings, but one of those places where the batteries are made and the cars are made and they all come together, which is what the car makers these days all want to be doing. Now, how are we doing for time? Good. Right, with 2 big stories in, big story to go. We've been talking about an annual $250 federal EV tax that's in the bill going through. This is where a Brit talks to 3 Americans about American politics. I'll shut up in a minute. It looks like that's been removed in the Senate's version. Senator Bernie Moreno, who was arguing last week that it should be a $500 tax per EV, is now saying it was removed because it would cost too much, because there was actually no physical collection system or process that exists to collect the money. To actually implement a system would have cost more than it would have raised. So that's his get out of jail free card to save face. He thought it'd be 500. Now he's saying, well, it should be 0 because it's too expensive. So that's his take. Senate Republicans have axed the $250 annual fee, $100 fee on hybrid. The bad news is the leasing loophole is likely going away, and soon. Again, I'll give you my take and I'll shut up in a minute. Leasing is how 2/3 of EVs today are required. A number of restrictions that come into play when financing an EV are avoided when the same car is leased. Things like where the vehicle is built or how much of the battery minerals originated in China. And so if you wanted to get the federal tax credit, $7,500, as long as you qualified for it, there were quite strict criteria, which I fully agreed with, by the way, because it was a way of nudging the US to local production. But leasing the vehicle, for reasons, got around it. And so it looks like what they can do is the Senate Finance Committee proposal, if passed, places the same restrictions for financing on leases that are there for the federal tax credit. Ultimately, it's all going to go away. So this does seem a little, not punitive or spiteful, but just a way to wrap it up as quick as possible. If this had been like it the whole time, it would have made sense, wouldn't it? Because the whole point of the last administration was about encouraging US manufacturing of these materials. I never quite got the lease loophole. I could never work out the reason for that. Tom, have you heard from your good friend and semi-regular guest on this podcast, Mike Murphy from the EV Politics Project, about this at all? And if not, then what's your take?
So no, I haven't talked to him recently. I think we were talking about getting back together sometime at the end of the summer when there's even more clarity on how this is going to happen. But, Mike and I have been talking about this for a while, and he, said months ago, it's the $7,500 tax credit. It's going to be almost impossible to save it. It's possible to get it pushed down the road. We might be able to get enough traction to get it where it gets phased out. And as long as it's still there, there's a chance at some point in the future of keeping it. But, it looks like in all probability that's going to go, which I don't think comes as a surprise to any of us. It's a good thing that really a punitive $250 a year, tax on EVs, that it's good that that's getting killed. But I think all of us here would agree that at some point EVs have to pay their fair share for road repairs and so forth. I don't think any reasonable person would say that's not the case. But this was $250 a year is punitive, more than appropriate. And there are quite a few states that already charge that. Where I live here in New Jersey, they started that annual fee for road tax last year, and it started out $250 and increases $10 every year until it reaches, I think, either $280 or $290 per year. So I own 4 EVs. I'm already paying $1,040 a year this year. Next year it's $1,080. The following year it's over $1,100 a year for my 4 EVs. That combined, I drive as many miles as having one car. So just to have them sit here, it's completely disproportionate. I did the numbers one day. It's kind of like as if right now with the miles I drive, I'm paying like over $1.50 a gallon tax. The equivalent, if I was buying gas, it would be like paying $1.50 a gallon for road tax. And if the $250 federal thing came in, God, I'd be paying like over $2 per gallon equivalent of road tax. So we've got to figure this out with a cohesive plan for the country, where the EVs do pay their fair share. But if we have individual states charging whatever they want, and then the federal government putting in something that is unreasonable, what it's going to be is punitive, and it's going to be specifically there to hurt electric vehicle adoption more than being fair. I think an annual fee, if we can't do, like, obviously the best thing would be a mileage-based fee for everybody to pay. I don't know how we implement that, all over the country, how, everybody would have to report their mileage or have to be automatically sent. You'll have all kind of people contesting that they don't want people to know how much they drive. That would be the most fair way to do it, that we all pay the same rate. But short of that, like a $99 a year fee would be, I think, pretty much on par with what the average person pays for gas. So, any event, that's the one part of it. The 7,500 tax credit, Martin, that's no surprise. We knew that was going to go away. It's going to hurt the industry for sure. But again, I think we would all agree that at some point it had to phase out. the existing, infrastructure bill had it phasing out, and was it 2032? I had always thought by the end of this decade we should be able to phase it out. And if this administration wanted to say, look, this is unfair, we have to cut this out, I think the right way to do it and the fair way to do it for the OEMs would be a phase out. Like, let's say they said, okay, starting in 2026, that 7,500 goes down to 5,000. In 2027, it's 3,500. In 2028, it's 2,000. 2029, it's 1,000, and then it's gone. That gives the manufacturers a runway. This, as we've seen, all of these companies have so much planning into building battery factories and so forth, based on the fact that this was going to help incentivize the sales of their vehicles, and they just got the rug pulled out from under them. So it's a terrible disruption. John is chomping at the bit to add something here, so he's our guest. Come on, John, jump in.
I apologize just because I have a hard stop in 5 minutes.
Okay.
So a couple of things. We are going to find out what the real appetite is for EVs in North America, absent a 4-figure incentive to buy them. I think it makes low-cost EVs much more important, because I've long believed, and you guys tell me if you agree or not, that if you have EVs in the sort of $30,000 to $40,000 range that are acceptable, large enough, have long enough range, they will be bought by a whole load of people who are not buying one for 40 grand or more. Just looking at it, people will be more willing to take a shot, especially as they have more friends, neighbors, relations, and coworkers who say, yeah, I have one and it's fine. It's a real car. The other thing to remember, though, is that if you look at the last Trump administration, many of the things the administration tried to do immediately were met with counter lawsuits, which had to wind their way through court. Sometimes there were restraining orders saying you can't do that policy. Sometimes there were orders that said you can do the policy, but we're still going to hear the case and you may have to reverse it. It is quite clear California has lots of lawyers, as do the CARB states. And so almost every one of these policies is going to be fought through the courts. I am not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV, but I have read people who do know what they're talking about suggesting that many of the things that the current administration is trying to do are way beyond the purview of the executive branch. And so we also have courts and we have the legislative branch. The latter appears to have walked away from many of its responsibilities. We will see. But there will be lawsuits about all of this stuff. I don't think the $7,500 tax credit is going to survive in its current form. So instead of 2030, we're going to find out in 2026. Okay. The more important one, the one I'm watching more closely, is all of the billions of dollars that have been granted to build battery factories in the States. And that is a strategic imperative because unlike Germany, well, Britain invented exporting cars. They didn't do it very well. Germany, Japan, and Korea, the Chinese are not an ally. They are an adversary nation, and there are very strong reasons not to let them dominate the global battery supply. Whether that horse has already fled, I don't know, but this was at least an attempt. About 2/3 of all of those battery facilities are in states run by the GOP. And we are now quietly seeing GOP elected representatives saying to the administration, if you kill that, I have to preside over the loss of 1,800 jobs in my district. That's not a good thing for my reelection prospects in November 2026. So I think there is much to be written yet. There are going to be court cases for decades, but the EV sales will probably dip this year. We'll see next year based on new entries, but it's not as if EVs are going to vanish from the US market. I was surprised to see there are apparently 90 plus separate EVs now on sale here. I think that includes model variations. You know, Audi has 9 variations of every EV. But watch what happens with the battery plants, because that's what will localize production, reduce costs, and in the end set up the US for proper EV production at higher scale after the current administration.
Brilliant.
And
John.
And that's what Martin asked me this question. What led into this? Have I talked to Mike Murphy? That's what Mike Murphy with his EV Jobs Alliance is focusing on, and he's constantly approaching, you know, senators in the red states that have battery plants and saying, look, this is going to hurt you. You know, it's going to hurt your state. You know, how do you support this? And they're making some headway, but like I said, Martin, I was going to wait till a little bit more. We knew a little bit more about it, and then maybe bring Mike back on the podcast. And I think John has to go. So,
John, thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
The automakers, especially the Detroit 2.5, spend a great deal of money on lobbyists on K Street, and it is not clear to me that those lobbyists have earned their money of late, because the auto industry needs regulatory certainty more than almost any other industry in America, because they have long product cycles. They spend billions of dollars. They haven't really had it since 2020, but it has gotten significantly worse through the last 3 administrations. So perhaps there will be new lobbying firms. We will see. Anyway, thank you for having me. I'm very sorry I have to leave. Martin, you and I can talk about the British car thing separately.
Yes.
And great to talk to you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming on,
John. We'll see you soon.
John, but want to give a shout out to your channels there real quick? You're muted. You're muted.
Oh, John may be muted.
You may be muted, John. There, 1 sec. Let's see if we can unmute you.
Oh,
yeah, go.
Yep. Sorry. My little side project on YouTube is Tempting Fate Tours, which is essentially me and a bunch of friends taking old, dubious, unreliable cars, often British, sorry, Martin, and taking them on long road trips.
Yeah.
We're just winding up last summer's trip, which was 1,000 miles in 70 and 75-year-old cars through the Netherlands, Germany, and the UK. And so join us on Tempting Fate Tours. You can find us on YouTube. Thanks for the promo.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Cheers.
Take care. See you. Amazing. Wow, what a get. When John launches the John Voelcker podcast, I am subscriber number 1, because I could listen to him talk all day. He's just, not only does he talk sense, but just,
he's a smart guy.
Obviously John's a smart guy, yeah, but just the way he talks, and I could listen all day. Right, so that is our regular session on politics. We'll get Mike back on him, and he can fill us in, like you say, at the end of summer. And so yeah, well, watch this space. I guess couple of videos. I don't know if you want to mention those. Tom, you put out a Ford Charge Station Pro, CCS1 to NACS adapter video, and also a cool video where you did an EV range test challenge in which you run the Porsche Macan at 70 miles an hour and compare its range when driven at 80. Some good videos you put out recently, sort of a mention for anything that people should look out for?
Yeah, well, we'll start off with the one that's up on the screen here. If you're watching on YouTube, ever since I got the Ford Charge Station Pro, I've had people message me saying, Tom, I got a Lightning, so I got the Ford Charge Station Pro. How do I charge my Tesla with it? And there was no way to do it because the Charge Station Pro is an AC charger that uses a CCS connector. And the CCS connectors are typically only used on DC fast chargers. Very few AC chargers have one. And because of how it's made, you couldn't fit the NACS to the NACS to J1772. No, J1772 to NACS adapter over on a CCS1 connector. It fits on a J1772 plug, but you couldn't get it on a CCS, even though the CCS connectors use the J1772 on the top. The adapter won't fit because there's a thick plastic tab in between the DC pins and the AC pins. So the adapter won't fit over that. So I've had people over the past few years ask me, how do I make this work? And there was no solution. It wouldn't work unless you modified your CCS1 connector, use like a Dremel or something, cut away that plastic, and then the adapter would fit on it, which I don't recommend modifying a connector, but it worked. Then a few companies came out with an adapter, a CCS to NACS adapter that would work on AC and DC, which again, I don't like also, because when you're charging with it, the pins are always live. So if you're charging on a J1772 charger into a NACS inlet, the DC pins are live. So if you stick your finger in there, you're going to get whacked with 240 volts. Now they do make a little flap here, but this is flimsy. This could break off relatively easily. And now if it's in your garage and you got a little kid running around, they stick their finger in that, kids stick their finger in whatever they can. That's a serious problem in any event. So I never really recommended that. But now A to Z came out with a new CCS to NACS adapter specifically for this case. There's nothing in the DC pins. They're just holes. So this is just an AC adapter specifically for people that have Charge Station Pro or another level 2 charger that utilizes a CCS connector. The bidirectional chargers use those because they use the DC pins for bidirectional. So in any event, I did a review on this, talked about this. People that have a Charge Station Pro now have a solution to charge their NACS equipped vehicle, a Tesla or another one, with this adapter. It costs $97, and it works fine, and it's safe. You don't have to worry about any issues with it on the vehicle side or somebody getting injured. And the reason why I did this more so than anything is now that they give the free Charge Station Pro and installation, they being Ford, with the purchase of any Ford electric vehicle, a lot of people are getting these Charge Station Pros installed, and they have a Tesla in their garage, or they then get a Tesla, and they're asking about, well, why can't I don't want 2 chargers in my garage. I want this to charge both. We'll just take turns. Now there's an easy way that you can do it. You just get that. It's called the Thunderstorm Lite. It's $97. I have an active coupon code, Stay to Charge, and you get a discount on it. So that works just fine with there. So that was that video. And the other video we talked about, Martin.
The Macan.
I did the 70 mile an hour Macan range test a couple weeks ago, and it went 343 miles, almost 345 miles at 70 miles an hour. While I had the car, Pete, who's in the comments stream here, he does work for me. Pete, he hopped in the Macan and drove it at 80 miles an hour on the same course that I did on the following day. And just to compare a 70 mile an hour trip with an 80 mile an hour trip, same course, about the same temperature. It might have been about 8 degrees cooler when Pete did the trip, but he DC fast charged it and got the battery up nice and warm. So the temperature difference really shouldn't have been any type of an issue here. And so he ended up going 284 miles or 285 miles. It was 60 miles less. So that's a difference, Macan. You're going to average 3 miles per kilowatt hour if you cruise along at 80 miles an hour and the relatively low wind on flat terrain in decent weather, and you're going to average 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour at 70 miles an hour. The difference is 60 miles. So I do these just to show people just how much farther you can go if you just slow down a little bit. When you're on a long road trip and you're concerned about, I don't know if I could make it. The Macan charges so well, it actually, you get there faster. If you were going on a super long road trip, you'd get there faster driving at 80 miles an hour, pulling off the road, charging back up to 80% and jumping back on, because it only takes 21 minutes to charge from 10% to 80%. And if you were driving at 70 miles an hour, you'd be, say, 30 miles behind if you drove for 3 hours than the car going 80 miles an hour. And he can get off the highway, charge to 80% and get back on the highway before you even meet that point. So, you actually would get to your destination faster driving at 80 miles an hour. It would cost you more. But if you're just trying to make a singular destination without stopping, just slow down a little bit. It makes a huge difference, like 20% farther, on if you just knock it down 10 miles an hour.
That's quite a difference, and that's actually a nice bit of range though. 284 miles at 80 miles an hour. Let's see.
Are efficient at speed. They're geared for Autobahn driving.
Yeah, it's great to see, that kind of range at a decent speed, because when you're going a long distance, 80 miles an hour seems kind of reasonable. You just keep your eyes peeled, for.
Well, it depends where you are. In a lot of states, that's
right. That's true. That is the speed limit.
That's the speed limit. So, but even here in New Jersey, where the speed limit is less, the flow of traffic, depending on the time of day, of course, rush hour, it's slower. But on the New Jersey Turnpike, on Route 80, on Route 78, when I drive to the airport, when I'm going to Newark Airport, when I drive on Route 78, I'm at 75 miles an hour. The speed limit's 65 miles an hour. I'm one of the slowest cars on the road. They're just whipping by me at 80, 85 miles an hour. And it's not, the police pick and choose who they want to pull over, because if they were enforcing, that they'd pull over half the cars on the road. They just let it rip, I guess.
Wow. So yeah, you don't have the cameras that we do. So we have all the cameras on the overhead gantries. And often we get average speed check cameras as well. So, over many, many miles of road, they'll just be taking your registration every, I don't know, mile or whatever. However, if there's an overpass or like a tunnel or whatever, they just put the average speed check cameras and and they're everywhere now. So you can't even speed up between the cameras, huh?
Do people speed at all though in the UK then?
Well, yeah. Obviously, if you know there's a speed camera, you would slow down for it. But now with all the average speed cameras that are tracking you over a long distance, and then working out your average speed not only between the waypoints but from beginning to end, you can't. No, you just set cruise control. Yeah. Just set intelligent cruise, and think about, listen to the radio, listen to something else, listen to the Battery Included podcast. Don't stress, because you can't get away. We have so many cameras. It is, and enforced. So, wow. And it's 70. So,
we have some cameras here for sure, but they are listed on Google Maps and Waze. You see them. I've encountered a few in my, and I'm like, oh, look, camera. Okay.
Slow down. And they go again.
Yeah.
I got hit with one in DC. Sorry,
no.
When I went to DC a couple of years ago, and they have it set up right off the highway. You're cruising on the highway at like 75 miles an hour. You get off the exit, and a lot of times you just coast down to the 45 mile an hour speed limit, which is, the first sign is like, 500 feet off the highway. But by the time you get to that, it's got you already. I got the ticket in the mail, like, a month later or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. We get that all the time. So go ahead, Dom.
I feel like that's a lot safer situation you have there in the UK, but on the other hand, I really hate the idea of all the cameras. So
we love a rule. You've got to remember, if we see a queue, we'll join it and then ask people, what are we queuing for? Like, you've got to remember that when the pandemic struck and our government said, you've all got to stay at home, we were like, yeah, sure, no problem. And like, you guys were like, you can't tell us what to do. And we're like, when can we go outside again, please? And so, it's cultures are different, and we like a rule. This is a screenshot, Tom, of your charging recently. That one at the top is rather large.
Tom shared this with us this morning. I was just looked at it real quickly, and I'm like, what the heck, man? Is EVgo charging you double all of a sudden? But no.
People told me these EVs were supposed to save you money. What the hell's going on here?
$100 fill-up, man.
Yeah.
$101.
So no, EVgo hasn't raised its prices. And this is with off-peak pricing, with their top tier plan. Like, I pay $13 a month to get the most reduced pricing. And then there's different times of day. I didn't do super off peak. Super off peaks after midnight, but this was off peak, which starts at 8 p.m. And that was last night. And there's a picture of my driveway right there. You can see I have my Equinox, my Rivian, my Lightning, and there's another vehicle sitting there that I have for the week. I'm actually going to do a road trip with it up to Canada next week.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, I'm going to go on a nice long road trip and document that. But yeah, that's the Cadillac Escalade IQ, and
Wow.
it is a rolling living room.
You've got your you've got your compact cars next to it, the Rivian and the Ford F-150. Your little ones. Wow, it's huge.
That thing is the beast. I feel like it's like the presidential car that they call the beast, because it has so much heft. You can feel the weight. You know, it's when the doors close, it's like a bank vault closing. You know, first of all, the doors open and close for you. You don't have to open and close the doors. You just grab the handle and it opens, and when you get in the car, when you step on the brake, the door closes for you. So, and this has the executive rear seating package, where, you know, it's got the big center console with airport like trays that come out and fold over for you to eat, and the you know, monitors on the rear of the front seats. I mean, that thing is it's nuts. I just got it yesterday, but the first thing I did was charge recording, and that's what you see, that $101 to fill this thirsty animal. But that's 0 to 100%. Almost no one would do that. And I mean, that would, at my house, that would have been $48, $49. So, you know, it still would be expensive, but you can go, the range rating is 460 miles on that. So it's still, you know, it's still charging at home. It's less than gas, but in any event, I should have some more content coming on that this week. It's a really nice freaking vehicle. The sticker on this, they always give you the Monroney stickers when they give you the car. 160.
Wow.
160,000. It's got 40 speakers.
The door's better
Base
open for
model,
you.
I think, has 32 speakers, but then when you get the executive seating in the back, you get more speakers. It has 40 speakers. I'm going to try to find them.
That's a great video.
Yeah, that's crazy. But any event, it's a nice ride.
Wow, it looks impressive. I can't help but admire that, and there's absolutely no need for anything to be that big, but I still admire it. So.
Look how small the R1S looks.
I know, just your little half a car there.
Is this a small version of the IQ?
It is the larger version. It's only, I think, 3 inches longer.
Right.
But it is longer. They have the XL or whatever they call it. So this is the sport version. 24-inch wheels. Monsters. I parked next to my buddy's got a GMC Sierra Denali SUV, and I parked next to him this morning, and he's got 22-inch wheels, which normally look huge, and it made his wheels look small.
You're like, bless, look at your little wheels. Oh, little dinky ones.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the hood is so tall. My mom is like, she used to be 5 feet, but she's probably like 4'9" now, or 4'10". I don't know. She's kind of shrunk, as we all do when we get older. Her head is almost to the, when she stood by the front of the car, her neck was where the top of the hood is.
Yeah.
The front hood is so high. And the one thing that's cool about the frunk in this, it's got a rack that pulls out. So let's say you load it up, and then you just pull the rack out so you can unload the frunk. I've never seen that in a frunk.
Oh, nice.
You know, like a big, you know, you could just, whatever you put in it, the whole thing slides right out, like a kitchen cabinet, you know, when you put the sliders in there, the drawers. So, but it's cool. It's nice. I should get some content up on it this week. Charging and range tests for sure. Of course, I'm going to do the 70-mile-an-hour range test. Pete's going to hop in it and do another range test with it to compare. But this time it might be a little different than what I did with the Macan. We'll have to see how that works out. But you know, Pete's going to have about 7 hours of seat time in this thing because it's going to go really far. So that should be fun.
Wow.
People are asking if it's the 200 kilowatt hour battery. in it, but it's more than that, right? It's 220 or something.
It's GM is fuzzy with battery
Yeah.
capacity. So
Yeah.
they say 205, I think, but I'm almost positive it's 212, because you can. There's no like set battery capacity. Like it depends on temperature and So I think GM nerfs it and just says 205 because it's always like that would be the least that they could actually test it at, depending on different circumstances. So, but I think actually it's more. I could tell you last night when I did the 0 to 100, the station deployed 239 kilowatt hours.
Wow.
That's why I paid that $101. But there's charging losses. The thermal management system uses energy while it's charging. It was ripping away, so I mean, it charged for the first 10 minutes or so at 325 kilowatt, I think. So, and that'll heat things up really quickly.
I should look up
Wow.
what they told the EPA that it does. I haven't looked at that site for a while.
It's
But
not
those
listed
numbers-
yet on the EPA.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not listed
It's-
yet. I looked it up to get the mileage, official EPA stuff, and it's not
Right.
on EPA yet.
Ooh, that's weird.
No, it happens. There's plenty of times cars have been available, and you don't see the data listed for a couple months after they start selling them. I've seen it before.
What's the weight? Do you know the weight of the Escalade IQ?
That's another thing that I was having a hard time getting the exact weight. All I could get from like GM or anything that they post is over 9,000 pounds.
So if you passed your driving test after 1997 in this country, and I passed mine before, so I get to drive a heavier vehicles. They just changed the rules for no, at that line in the sand. You didn't do anything differently on your driving test after 97. We're allowed to drive vehicles up to 7,000 pounds. Anything more, and we call that a heavy goods vehicle. You got to go get a truck license. So we can't even drive that vehicle.
Yeah, so
That's crazy.
So it gets better. Let me show you something. I took a picture. Since you're talking about, I got to find the picture about weight. So that there's different weight restrictions on roads, right? Different.
Yeah.
Where I live out here in Chester, most of the main roads that come into my town off of the main arteries, right, have this sign on it.
Weight limit 4 tons.
4 tons.
Whoa! Whoa!
So
Yeah.
So technically, if I bought this vehicle or the Silverado or the Hummer, I would have a hard time getting to my house legally.
That's 4.5 tons. You got to leave it at the sign and hope no one steals it. Walk home.
And what would happen if like the local police got onto this? Like they realized that the GM vehicles with the big battery weigh more than the weight limit. Would I get harassed? Would the keep pulling me over and being like, Tom, you can't drive on this road? And I'm like, yeah, but I need to get to my house. Well, to get to your house, you've got to go up, go to the next town, come back around and swing around on these roads. This is your path of roads that allow more than 4 tons. Like it would be incredibly inconvenient,
Wow.
and I drive up to Vermont to my in-laws' house a lot. They got a lot of little covered bridges. They've got these signs on them too. And sometimes it's the only way to get from here to there. So is this vehicle do we need to change the weight restrictions on the roads, or does GM need to start putting in smaller batteries? It's like, this is a problem. I have to break the law when I drive one of these vehicles.
Yeah, I was going to bring this up when we were talking about how to equitably tax transport. But John was on a time crunch and had to go and whatnot. But one of the proposals, which has some traction over here, is to tax on weight. And weight is incredibly equitable because it doesn't take into account at all the technology to drive it. So to say diesel, petrol, electric, hybrid, it can get political, it can get contentious. People get very Yeah, which as we all know, right? People can just throw their arms in the air and say it's fair or not fair either way. So if you tax on weight, and that's equitable because of the amount of impact on the roads that weight causes, and if it's not a working vehicle. So we all want food to get to the supermarkets. So, we can't tax lorries off the road. But if it's not used for that, it's just an essential service. If it's private transport, then you're causing more pollution because it wears down the tires quicker. If it's not an EV, it's using more brakes, and it is just generally causing more damage. Now, we did have a brilliant comment a few weeks ago from someone who used to do this for a job and was like, "This is quite overblown," but it would certainly make people think about the size of vehicle they buy. It would work over here. It wouldn't work where you are, but it would work over here. Because it's a really interesting way of thinking about the impact that we have on, our built environment. So, you need to combine it with miles driven, but we have an annual test, we have an MOT, we have a 12-monthly test anyway where our mileage is recorded. So it would work.
Yeah. So Linda Campbell posted, Tom, it applies to commercial vehicles. Does it? Are you sure that that's only for commercial vehicles? And if so, why? Why would that be? If the weight is the problem, the roads don't care if it's commercial or not. Is it maybe to restrict a lot of traffic by commercial vehicles? And here's another one. I register all my vehicles to my company.
True.
It's commercial.
Does that mean it's a commercial vehicle? I don't have commercial plates. When you register to a business, you don't get commercial plates. So maybe it's not considered commercial. But this is something that maybe I'll actually drive over to my local police department and talk to them about and say, I want clarity on this. If I get one of these, will I have a problem? And how do you view it? And I'm sure they're going to be like, look, we're not going to take you. You live in town, but I would like to know what technically is true, So, that would be interesting. It's an interesting conversation, and I might even just make a video on it, and because I think it's an interesting topic. There's a lot of roads that say that weight limit for 4 tons, and like I said, where I come here off of many of the major arteries to get into my town, that is posted right on the corner. So don't turn onto the street. We have a weight limit. So
wow, and that's there for a reason. So
Gary has a great suggestion here. Stop at a truck stop and get it weighed, Tom. It'll make a video in
I don't even know where there's any weigh stations near me. Maybe if somebody lives near me here that they'd know. I don't even know where there's a functioning weigh station.
You have an interstate, right?
I do, Route 80, but I don't even know where there's a weigh station. I think there's one, but there's nobody ever there. Like it's not operational. So maybe somebody that knows me that lives in North Jersey, because I'll do that. I'll pull up and see what it weighs. So, but I don't know of any here, to be honest.
Gary's guaranteeing you 1 million views. He's going to sit at home and hit it over and over again.
Yeah, if I drive on a bridge and it breaks. Yeah, if I have cameras set up and I go into the river.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I have limits, Gary, on what I'll do for clicks.
Right. Before we go, it's Pikes Peak week. So a bunch of different cars racing up America's mountain in search of racing glory. EVs, as always, the Super Mustang Mach-E is a custom-built EV. They've called it a Mach-E. 3 motors, almost 1,500 horsepower, faster and lighter than the F-150 Lightning Super Truck that won last year. Driven again by Romain Dumas, who knows how to take an electric car up there pretty quickly. Holds the all-time record in the VW IDR. Lots to get excited about with that. We'll probably talk about anything noteworthy on the podcast next week. And that brings us to the end of our show. Good show. John's such a legend, isn't he? So he can come back anytime. We'll wrap it up there. Look at that. We've done our podcast for today. Questions, comments, you know the score. Head to the YouTube channel. Even if you're one of our audio-only listeners, probably the best place to do it. You can click on like on the YouTube channel. That really helps other people find the podcast. And you can hit on subscribe as well and tap the bell icon so you never miss a show. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you again very soon. Hey, before we go, we want to hear Dom say ciao.
Ciao.